Everybody, welcome back. Continuing our book review, The Art of Power, which talks about Thomas Jefferson. So we're in a new section, and this is titled The Course of Human Events. There's a couple quotes here, okay? For God's sake, declare the colonies independent at once, and save us from ruin. And that's from John Page to Thomas Jefferson in spring 1776. Declare the colonies independent. Yeah. The next one says, the bells rung all day and almost all night. Even the chimners chimed away. John Adams describing the reaction to the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, 1776. Wow. Okay. Here we go. We're on page 98. At about 7 o'clock on the morning of Sunday, March 31st, 1776, Jefferson's mother Jane, 55 years old, was stricken with a stroke and succumbed within an hour. Whoa, she died that quick? Or she just got weakened? Jefferson asked the Reverend Charles Clay to preside over the funeral. Dang! A stroke that just bam! Jane Randolph Jefferson was buried at Monticello. In seeing that his mother was put in the ground, he held sacred near others he loved. Jefferson made certain that she would always be part of his home and part of him. Interesting, to bury her at Monticello, which is his estate. Family plots on stuff like that. It's very interesting. I wonder if you could visit her grave today. Jane's death disoriented her son, already immersed in the most difficult and fearful of political enterprises, revolution and the creation of a new form of government. Jefferson was brought face to face with one of the deepest personal crises a man can experience. In their parents, children ideally have sources of protection and comfort and love. Parents can also be sources of irritation, fear, and anxiety. Their deaths thus represent both loss and liberation. The mix of the two emotions can be changeable depending on the hour of the year, but one thing is constant: the parent is gone, which means the child himself, at whatever age, is compelled to assume a measure of the weight of the world, commensurate with the passing of time and the increase in responsibility. Yeah, I mean, your parents go, your rock is there. I have a dear friend who, when a family member of theirs passed, they changed after. And you could definitely tell that there was a shift in consciousness for sure. Though living a crowded and consequential life, Jefferson may have been a lonelier man on the day his mother died than he had ever been. As he turned away from the graveyard, he was not leaving his mother behind. At moments of intense emotional distress, Jefferson often suffered what he would call an attack of my periodical headache. Ooh, those are worse. Sometimes I get a shooting pain that goes back from here, like, it's miserable. A migraine headache so debilitating and vicious that he once said he was obliged to avoid reading, writing, and almost thinking. That's brutal, man. Sometimes not even a nap helps, right? Before 1776, his last known bout had come in the wake of his heartbreak over Rebecca Burwell. With the death of Jane Randolph Jefferson, the blood and nerves in his brain gave him nothing but anguish. This is interesting. They said Caesar suffered seizures. And here we're looking that Thomas Jefferson suffered from a mental infliction as well. And interesting, Emilia Clarke, the actress who does Daenerys Targaryen in the Game of Thrones series, she had a brain aneurysm. So it's fascinating how several people whom I admire had some affliction in their brain. Wow. It was a strange time for Jefferson, who lived with the headache, the mourning, and the uncertainty about America's next step. He tried to stay engaged in the life of the plantation, paying a midwife to deliver Elizabeth Hemming's son, John. He tried, too, to stay engaged in life beyond Monticello, collecting money for power for Virginia, and for the relief of the poor of Boston. Oh, He tried to engage life beyond it. Oh wow, he money for powder, gunpowder. Huh. He left Monticello for Philadelphia on Tuesday, May 7th, 1776, arriving 7 days later. Patty stayed in Virginia. I am here in the same uneasy, anxious state in which I was the last fall without Miss Jefferson, who could not come with me, Jefferson told his fellow Virginia politicians, Thomas Nelson, Jr. On May 23rd, he took quarters at a three-story house owned by bricklayer Jacob Graff. My grandpa he did it like bricklaying for a while. It's interesting. Hard job. On the southwest corner of 7th and Market Street in Philadelphia. He initially felt out of phase with the other delegates. They were speaking of matters he had missed while he had been in mourning at Monticello. Yeah, you go in your own zone, right? When you grieve, you go in like your own area of just like, ugh. And then the world around you continues even though your world is crashing. That's what grief does to people, right? But he soon found himself at the center of everything. Plugged right back in, right? At the end of the first week of June 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia moved the United Colonies were absolved from all the allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. At last the hour of decision was at hand. The debate over independence began the next day. Congress was not chiefly concerned about the rights of man or even the shape of an American polity. American polity. Congress was not chiefly concerned about the rights of man. This sounds a lot like today. You know, the aid packages, right, for the virus going to the corporate bailouts instead of just regular folk. History's trumpets were sounding, but only in the distance. The clatter that dominated the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia was about domestic politics and international relations at their most practical. I love international relations a lot. I took a class on international relations. It was very cool. Very cool. But I do think that's how you get a lot of globalists. Definitely how you get a lot of globalists. And then the problem with domestic politicians sometimes is they get really close to bribes through the transnational corporations. It's very interesting. Some representatives argued that a precipitous declaration of independence might provoke some, if not all, of the middle colonies, which is, says here, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and New York, to secede from the American cause. If there were such a domestic crack-up, Jefferson reported, foreign powers would either refuse to join themselves to our fortunes, or, having us so much in their power, they would insist on terms of proportionality more hard and prudential. So it's like basically saying, if New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware are not on board with, taking on the crown, allies such as France and others might not see the revolution as viable and will pull their support financially and maybe not, give arms and such. And then they might even side with the other opposite party of force, and then they would not be able to conduct the revolution. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? John Adams, Richard Henry Lee, George Wythe, and others marshaled the evidence in favor of declaring independence. First, they noted that no gentleman had argued against the policy or the right of separation from Britain, nor had supposed it possible we should ever renew our connection. They had only opposed its being now declared. A compromise was proposed. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and South Carolina were not yet matured for falling from the parent stem, Jefferson said. Look at that. Not yet matured for falling from the parent stem. It's interesting he uses a tree analogy because there's the other saying of the tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of tyrants. And then here it's actually saying the parent stem, so the parent stem would be the tyrannical Britons. They need to uproot that. There's a lot of tree metaphors, right? A lot of tree metaphors in the founding fathers' writings and quotes and such. Jefferson said, and it was thought most prudent to wait a while for them, but not too long. A vote was put off 3 weeks, until the 1st of July, in the interim, so that this might occasion as little delay as possible, Jefferson said. Committees were appointed to draft a declaration, prepare a plan for the new government, and set guidelines for the negotiation of foreign alliances. Yeah, Jefferson's just like, alright, I've mourned my mom. We gotta make sure that these other places, the middle colonies, are in unison with us to the goal. It's time to get on it. It's interesting.